Welcome, everyone, to episode 377 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pantellaresco. I write stuff in podcast 2. Today, story time, The Cloud Diver, Chapter 4, Part 1. Johnny learns the hard way you can never quite go home again. And this is like the heart and soul of the book. Some of the things that have happened to Johnny kind of start to come to a head here, which is, I think, fun. And yeah, halfway through the book, which I think is really cool. Anyway, my guest today, the reading guest, the other side of that coin, is the great J.M. Landels, who's going to be a guest literally next Tuesday as well. J.M. Landels is the author of Alanis Song, that saga, but she's also most well known for her magazine Pulp Literature, which is a fantastic magazine. You should definitely check it out, pick it up as you can. Books, comics, stories, everything's in there. It's one of the best. Their thing is a good book for the price of a beer, which is good. And it's the perfect thing to drink a beer with, by the way. So yeah, we get to hear from her as well. Got some news. Like I said, Zero is official. It comes out July 16th. The Cloud Diver, is a book, as my book will end in August, and Zero will be the month of September, which I think is kind of cool. That's the plan. But Zero is Alice in Wonderland is Greek mythology. And I'm going to announce here right now that there's going to be a tea party July 16th. Tea and games on Zoom, featuring myself and hopefully a plethora of guests. That's the idea anyway, as Alice Zero launches into the stratosphere. But before we get to tea parties, we must get back to the town of Golden. And Golden's where we're going to be. So, without further ado, let's continue with the Cloud Diver, shall we?
Something wicked this way comes. Prairie Gothic is a new collection of psychological horror stories set on the vast Canadian prairies by up-and-coming talents. And we need your help. By contributing to Prairie Gothic through Kickstarter, you can unlock special swag, exclusive contributor-only events, and even have a song written about you. Visit kickstarter.com/profile/prairie soul to find out more and see what's waiting for you in the wide open spaces.
The Cloud Diver, Part 4, Chapter 1. Feed Void Life. _truths at The Truth Is Out There. Unverified account. This flu is far worse than reported. Hasn't been one like this for nearly 200 years. When people stopped chasing you, your body and mind calmed down. Fear and wondering when the next bomb would go off gave way to a calm and satisfying numb. For a couple of hours after our escape, I'm sure I dozed off. Daylight and dawn had arrived when I came to. All the tension from when we nearly died, evading the search, seemed a distant memory. I was still alive! Not only did I live through that escape, but I was going home! That gave me a far stranger reaction. I wasn't sure what to feel about it, to be honest. How had I ended up back here? Well, I know how I ended up in this situation. I grabbed a file, met a man named Adam, and got fired. Disbelief and the surreal feeling are warring with a hollow emptiness. Everything I've been through in the past couple days hit hard. Maybe it was the music and the songs we're singing about a white whale on the radio. Maybe it was the fact that my mind was quiet. For as long as I can remember, I could feel Stevie Y's presence. Even when he's doing nothing but lazing about, there was something reassuring about him being there. I was never alone. Loneliness might be the most frightening feeling of all. My mind had uncorked a distant memory with certain death. The things I had endured since I stepped out onto the 13th floor hit me with the sound of silence. All was quiet. Lost didn't even begin to describe how I was feeling at this moment in my life. Discombobulated in all conceivable ways seemed like a more accurate answer. I didn't know what to do. I worried about my friend, who now was past the library somewhere, hopefully finding a quiet place to hide and not playing with weird spam. On top of my feelings and general disconnection from the known world, I was heading to the last place I expected to see. He's quiet, Gunblade said to Violas. I take it that's not a normal thing? Shrieking and squeaking is a normal thing. I didn't react to the jibe, which prompted Gunblade to examine me closely. You alright? No, I answered. His life did just get turned inside out, Atlas pointed out as a sign saying the city was about 2 kilometers away passed by. What piqued my interest was the homemade sign right behind it that said, "Turn back now, plague ahead," in scarlet letters. My reverie evaporated to a flutter of butterflies in my stomach. "How much does he know?" asked Atlas. "Not much," Gunblade answered. "Show or tell?" "Show will hit home. He's already..." "What's going on?" I snapped, tired of the two of them talking about things I had no clue about. I want to know what I was stepping into. I couldn't handle any more surprises. "Tell a little first, then," Gunblade conceded. Brakes screeched and we were on the side of the road. Atlas turned to me with kind eyes. "You're not going to like what's ahead. Things are bad." "Bad?" The bottle eyes had evolved into very large, flapping wings that resembled terrible lizards. I had watched Gunblade blow up buildings without a thought to collateral damage, and Atlas didn't seem like he was cut from a much different cloth. Terrible thoughts of what awaited me poured into my brain in breakneck meeting. "You've been through a lot," Atlas admitted. "This is going to be harder," Gunblade said. "Does it have to do with the file you gave me?" Gunblade couldn't look me in the eye for longer than half a second. She flinched trying to meet my gaze and ended up swearing, forcing the door open. With great reluctance, I got out of the backseat after her, Atlas taking the rear. Gunblade kicked a random stone about 1,000 miles in the opposite direction. As the rock twirled in its new orbit in the sky, it hit me that bad news was coming. I had just survived being killed. My best friend was missing and my hometown was, well, I was about to find out. "Your town is ravaged," Atlas said carefully. "Are they all dead?" I blurted out. "Some are," Gunblade answered. "Most are sick to various degrees. Unofficially, the government has quarantined the area. The town has cooperated. But soon things will become challenging," Atlas answered. "Supplies are very intermittent. Only the Chimera Corporation is even trying to make their usual deliveries here. There's already a bit of desperation here. It will get worse soon, if it hasn't happened already. My tower of stability was broken. My town was abandoned. I just survived attempted murder. I had no job, no future. My best friend is missing. I shouldn't have this brave new world, my house of cards that were the foundations of all my certainties had dealt me this hand. Damn it, Johnny. You've come so far. What was this? Why couldn't I stop shaking?" "Deep breaths," Gunblade whispered. She put her hand on my shoulder. For just a moment, I saw someone that gave a damn. The way she gripped me was gentle, as if I was nothing but glass. I was about to break, and she knew it. A petty part of me wanted to mouth out that this was her fault in some way, but rational Johnny interjected at that moment and countered that Gunblade didn't control the world. Shit happened, and she was doing exactly what I was trying to do, the best she could. It was really tempting to let petty Johnny have his way, but the angel of reason was right. My panic slowly receded, and strength came back to me. Breathing became easier until I was nearly calm. Gunblade and I nodded at Atlas. "Let's go," she said. "Some homecoming. I haven't even stepped foot in town yet and things were already in the toilet." What was I to do? I'd come this far. The rest of the way was only a few clicks away ahead. Might as well brace for it. I nodded, stepping back into the car without a word. Gunblade looked like she was about to say some stupid platitude when Gunblade tapped her on the wrist, and shook his head. She sighed and put her head down. I did my best to brace myself and imagine the worst thing I could. That way, whatever I found would be good news by comparison. The only real comfort I had was Lisa. She was still in town, right? I wondered how time had changed her. Was she married with kids now? She always talked about having a family. Hopefully she'd fallen in love and had that wish come true. Everyone deserved to be happy. I wasn't happy, though. Near death tended to give clarity to the important things of life. As little ink blots in the distance became houses I hadn't seen in years, I found a new kind of excitement, and I suddenly perked up to being fully alert and awake. I devoured details in the blink of an eye, anxious to even begin to cover my feelings. As the houses solidified, I noticed yellow ticker taping around the city, white signs with the same crimson markers I'd seen on the road, and also decorated the houses. All of them said the same thing over and over again. Quarantine.
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
And that was my reading for this week, ladies and gentlemen. And now we will continue now with the one and only J.M. Landels. I hope you guys enjoy what she has here.
Hi, this is Jen Landels, otherwise known as J.M. Landels. I'm the author of the Elenia's Song trilogy. And I'm just going to read you a couple of excerpts from the first book, Elenia's Song Overture. The second book, Aria, just came out, but I can't really read from that without reading a bunch of spoilers. So for those of you who have read Overture already, you can just skip over and buy a copy of Aria and read it for yourself. But for those of you who haven't, here's a little intro to it. Elenia's Song is about a young girl growing into an adult who can sing music into magic. It's also the story of her mother and her grandmother when they were both younger women. The three stories sort of braid together and provide a backstory to Elenia's Song. Oh, I guess I should tell you where you can find it. It's available on Amazon and, of course, on the Pulp Literature website. That's the publisher website, pulpliterature.com. As well as Ingram and at your favorite independent bookstore. It can be ordered in anywhere. The first section is from right at the beginning of the book, when Elenia was quite a small girl. The second section tells the story of her mother, Loresa, and the third section is from the point of view of her grandmother, Irdane. Here we go. Elenia's Song Overture by J.M. Landels. Verse 1. Brothers, Sisters, and Lullabies. If you walk down the grand staircase of Castle Osthane, you will see a family portrait. It's placed across the landing from the wide steps so that your eye is drawn helplessly into the picture as you descend. Such is the skill of the Lazenmira painter that you are almost convinced the little girl on the right will jump out of the frame and take off pell-mell into the courtyard. And you can tell that is what she wanted to be doing when the image was painted. The little girl was me. There are other, more formal paintings of my family members, individual and grouped, spread throughout the fortress. But the one at the bottom of the stairs is the only one that tells me a story. In this painting, I'm shown in my favorite tunic of soft flannel, the one my nurse turned into handkerchiefs when I grew too large for it, and loose-fitting trousers rolled to the calf above grubby bare feet. My mother's arm is around me, her fingers creasing the cloth beneath my arm. It is a half-hearted grip, as if holding me still takes more effort than she can afford. Her eyes are tired and her skin pale. Wisps of curly blonde hair escape a hastily pinned coif, and the bodice of her dress is askew, barely containing the blue-veined and swollen breasts. The head of the family, Lord Osthane, Elenis Andre, Duke of Tilai, and Warden of the Clearwater Plains, stands behind her and to her right. A possessive arm rests on her shoulders, the other is proudly akimbo. He beams with joy, and this is the only portrait that paints him so. In truth, it is the happiest my 3.5-year-old self ever saw him. The subject of his joy rests in Mother's right arm, its bawling, ruddy face showing a remarkable resemblance to the Duke already. I don't know why the artist didn't portray the baby content at the breast or with an idiosyncratic smile as most painters would, but I'm glad he didn't. This is how I remember my brother Alanry when he arrived to interrupt my life, and I appreciate the painting's candor. I recall that day, or one of those days. After sitting for the painter, I ran outside into the bustling lower court, where chickens scratched in the warm sun of late spring, men-at-arms practiced sword drills, and my nurse Angeli tended the herb garden. I didn't want to talk to her right then, so I slipped between the tight-packed limbs of the hedge maze, following my own small, secret trails to the center. I sat down in the yellowish gravel and buried my feet in sun-warmed chippings. I had a tight, lumpy feeling in my chest and warmth beneath my eyes, but I didn't want to cry. I wasn't going to cry over him. There were footsteps on the gravel, trying not to be heard. Go away. I threw a handful of pebbles at the place I knew she'd appear. Leave me alone. My nurse bent down and examined the stones that had tumbled on the mossy verge of the path. She turned her head to look at me, her face crinkling into laugh lines. It's the huntress, Elenia. She held out a sun-browned hand to me. Come and look. Curiosity overcame my resistance, as she knew it would, and I crawled over to see. Her fingers picked out the constellation of stones. Here is her head and shoulder. The grey-blue one is the tip of her sword, and here, she delineated an arc of pebbles, is her bow. With a child's obstinacy, I replied, "She doesn't have any feet." "Too true, Elenia. Where do you think they are?" I shrugged. "Over there?" I pointed to where I'd gathered a fistful of rocks. Angeli nodded, her eyes clouding over as they did when she was deep in thought. I followed her gaze, wondering what she could see past the impenetrable green of the hedge. I think you're right, dear. Now tell me, what's the matter?" The storm came back over me, and I hunched into myself. Angeli waited, her hand resting on my back. Even today, I can sometimes feel that warmth between my shoulder blades when I need resolve. "I hate him," I mumbled into my knees. "Alanry." The lumpy feeling returned, and despite my best efforts, my eyes started watering. "He ruined it." The tears began in earnest, and Angeli lifted me into her arms, humming softly. I know," she murmured. "He's taken over your mama, for the time being. That's what babies do, you know. Mama and Alanry need each other now, but you have me." I wasn't mollified. "But you'll be his nurse, too." She shook her head. "No, darling, I came to this house to help birth and raise you. Your mama and papa will have to find someone else to help with Alanry and their other children." Now I was appalled. "Other children?" She laughed. "There will be more siblings for you, Elenia. You may get that little sister after all. You might even grow to like Alanry." I frowned, emphatic. She kissed me on the head, silencing the protest. "Never say never, dear one. Whatever you may think of him, he's your blood, and you will need each other one day." Angeli was right. I did like Alanry on and off, as siblings do, and we even became allies when our sister Loriana usurped Mama's body and attention once more. Not to say there wasn't fierce competition between us. He grew quickly, and it was clear he would have the bull-like physique of our father. By the time I was 10 and he 6, he had the height and more than breadth of me, though I outstripped him for a while once more in adolescence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. During Alanry's infanthood, I grew farther away from my mother and closer to my nurse. She was of the Lazenmira race, and she gave me much of her knowledge of plants and animals, healing and midwifery. But what I loved most about her was her singing. All my early life I could hear Angeli singing. No matter what she was doing, gardening, sewing, reading, there was a tune percolating from her throat. It was Angeli who sang my siblings and me to bed every night. Her lullabies were devastating in their effect, and it seemed at first I was never able to hear the end of one before my eyes fell shut and locked me in sleep. Eventually, though, whether it was because I was older or simply more stubborn than my brothers and sisters, I learned to keep myself awake to the end of the song. This allowed me to leave my bed once the lanterns were extinguished and perch on the window seat reading by moonlight. It also let me learn her songs to the end. On a morning not long after my 7th birthday, I gained my first inkling of what those songs could do. I was in the Grange loft, playing with a litter of kittens whose half-wild mother I had wooed for many weeks. I held a black bundle of fur in my arms and hummed a lullaby as it purred and nestled in. From behind me I heard clumsy fumbling on the loft ladder. It was Alanry. I could tell by his noisy breath and careless movements. He wasn't allowed into the hayloft, being too young to climb safely, but that didn't stop him. Irritated, I wished him away and kept my back turned. I did not want him here, interrupting my time with the kitten. With ever louder huffing and thumping, he pulled his tiny body up through the hole in the loft floor. I sang louder, ignoring him, drowning out his presence. Gradually, his stuffy-nosed breathing slowed and deepened. I could hear him yawn. I reached the final chorus of my song, and at last turned a glaring eye on him. He stood, eyes closed, stubby toddler body swaying with sleep. I watched in fascinated horror as he collapsed backward and fell down the trapdoor. The next few moments were a frantic blur. I had no idea whether I climbed or jumped down after him. He lay wailing, his face no more than a wrinkled red apple with a giant hole in the middle. I clapped a hand over his mouth, terrified someone would hear, and wrestled with the decisions every child makes at the scene of a sibling accident. Whether to stay and console, run for help, or hide and pretend not to have seen what happened. The decision was made as Alanry's nurse came running in, our 2-year-old sister slung across her hip. "What have you done, wicked girl?" She dumped Loriana on the barn floor and rushed to Alanry. Instead of answering, I ran. Angela found me hours later, hidden beneath the cloth drapery that covered the table harpsichord. My tears had dried some time ago, and I was debating whether it was safe to sneak to the kitchens for some food. Angela's head poked beneath the cloth. "Are you ready to be found yet?" I wiped my face with a dusty sleeve, no doubt making both even dirtier. It wasn't my fault. Her eyes were piercing, but not unsympathetic. "Come out from there and tell me about it." We sat side by side on the harpsichord bench, my short legs swinging in time to my nervous heartbeats. I explained how Alanry had climbed into the forbidden loft, glossing over how long I'd known he was there, and tumbled backwards down the hole. The explanation seemed plausible, and was truthful as far as it went. Angela, as always, sensed the unsaid. "Why do you think he fell?" I shrugged. "Was he clumsy?" I looked up, hopeful at the convenient excuse, but Angela continued. "Did something bump him?" I frowned, knowing that explanation, aside from being untrue, could lead me into more trouble. "No," I finally pushed the words out. "He fell asleep." Angela looked thoughtful. "And what were you doing?" "Holding a kitten." "And?" "Singing." "Singing what?" I hesitated, then blushed, the extent of my guilt sinking in. "A lullaby." Alenia's Song Overture by J.M. Landels. Verse 2, Loresa's Chorus. The silk of Loresa's dress hisses as she and her attendant descend the twisting stair to the great hall. The sky-blue fabric was chosen to match her eyes, the gold underskirt to match her hair. She is ornamental, an object of decor to adorn someone else's castle. She nearly collides with Sir Drianan at the bottom of the stair. He catches her hand, brings it to his lips. "You are ever more ravishing than usual today, Princess." Drianan is a rogue and a flatterer whose attentions spread wide among the ladies of the court. She has always playfully rebuffed. How much she will miss them. "Ah, Highness," he continues, "the Lion of Arac is here to steal you away. Take pity on this poor suitor and escape with me now. I'll carry you off to the forests of the Valnerata, where none will dare follow. We'll build a house high in the trees and while away the days, laughing at the antics of the court from our perch." She laughs past the lump in her throat, unable to speak with sudden longing. She throws her arms around his neck and delivers an impulsive, lingering kiss. He is startled, but takes advantage of the opportunity nonetheless. A deliberate cough from her lady's maid breaks them apart. Loresa sweeps into the hall, readjusting her delicate coiffure, while Drianan is left to lean against the staircase pillar with a bemused look. "And that, Princess, was the cruelest blow of all," he murmurs. She is Loresa Irdane Brandis Leisana, Princess of Brandishire, for now. Loresa Irdane Leisana Andrig. When she murmurs it under her breath, the heavy last syllable catches in her throat like a piece of undercooked dough. It is an ugly, awkward name, and she wonders if it matches the man who owns it. Alenus Andrig, Duke of Tilai, has arrived at the court of Rarin today. There will be 4 days in which they will meet and pretend to a courtship, but the betrothal will take place on the 5th day, whether they like or loathe one another. The vast tiled surface of the hall is striped with slices of light from leaded windows. She crosses it to the small room in the corner tower where her father receives his private guests. 2 pages stand at the doorway. One is Phelan, her half-brother. The other wears the wine and gold livery and lion rampant of House Andrig. The latter bows as she approaches. The former purses his lips and makes kissy noises. She passes with calm dignity, cuffing Phelan on the ear so adroitly the other page fails to notice. Her father, Prince Chanus, rises as she enters, grasping both her hands in his. She is shocked to see her own nervousness reflected in his eyes. Alenus Andrig notices her half a heartbeat later. He stands and bows low, sweeping the floor with the feather of his doffed hat. "Your Highness," his voice is rough and gravelled. There are coils of grey in his dark and curly head, but she can't make out his face with the morning sun at his back. Her stepmother, Guanan, the Princess High, remains in her seat between the two men and pats the stool beside her. Larissa moves to stand by her, curtsying. Lord Osthane, says Guanan, using Andraig's manorial title rather than his newly inherited ducal one. Allow me to introduce my husband's daughter, Larissa. Larissa notes the lack of her own titles and the careful use of husband's daughter. That would sting if she weren't beyond such tiny hurts by now. He takes her hand in his small but hardened one and kisses the air above her fingertips. His palm is sweaty. With nerves? She resists the urge to wipe dry her fingers. As they sit, she gets a better look. He's not a tall man, but he is broad through the chest and seems well-muscled. She can't decide if he's handsome or not. He's nearly as old as her father, and it's hard to imagine sharing his bed. That unbidden thought sends a shudder of rebellion out from her stomach. Those sentiments had been tamed weeks ago, or so everyone had thought. Guanan had called her to this very room 4 months past, embraced her in the sisterly way she had adopted in the last few years, and explained why peace in the Ilmar depended on Larissa. It wasn't news as such. She'd always known, without remembering how or when she'd been told, that the crown would pass to one of her junior half-siblings. She had accepted and even revelled in the knowledge that she would not bear the yoke of sovereignhood. She never dreamed that in exchange she had become a political commodity. She exploded, not then and there before her stepmother, but in a series of escalating blasts of rebellion, both outward and covert. Neither family nor servants were safe from her temper, the likes of which she had never shown before. She slept past noon each day, caring little for the admonitions of her lady's maid, and she turned away the physicians sent to her door by her concerned father. Why trouble to preserve her health and beauty for a fate already sealed? The facade of the docile princess had cracked and crumbled, revealing a fury deeper and older than she had known existed. Her father, perhaps, eaten by his own feelings of guilt, matched anger with anger, until it was no longer possible for the two of them to sit in the same room. Guanan remained sweet and understanding, a triumph of self-control in the face of the tempest, but frowned to herself and spent long hours consulting the household healers and mages. The dark and hidden passages of the bastion, once explored as a child in the spirit of adventure, became Larissa's escape routes from faces she could no longer bear seeing. She retreated to the rooftops of the farthest towers or to dank, neglected cellars, sulking, brooding, and nursing her anger during the day. At night she used the forgotten bolt hole that leads down through the bedrock of Bastion Hill and emerges below the outer bailey in the streets of Raran. Had she chosen, she could have gone farther, outside the walls of Raran itself. Being castle-bred, though, it was not fields and farmland that called her, but the warreny bustle of city streets. There, clad in servants' robes, bright hair braided close and hidden beneath a dull-wool cloak, she wandered, seeking the noisiest, roughest-looking taverns she could find, and drank dark, bitter ale that suited her mood. Rogues and furloughed soldiers bought her rounds. She accepted them without any sense of obligation, and it is a wonder she fell into no worse trouble in those months, though it was trouble enough. The final conflagration occurred a mere 3 weeks ago. Larissa had been out of the castle 10 nights of the last dozen, and each time spent her evenings with the same group of rough youths. Unlike the casual encounters in the early days of her rebellion, these few had become friends. A gypsy girl, a runaway deckhand, the son of a wealthy tailor, and a gutter-bred cutpurse. They were a mismatched collection of malcontents, united only by dissatisfaction with the lives they had been born to. Her newfound companions asked no questions, and Larissa did not reveal her own background. She had that much caution left in her, and knew the ransom price she could fetch. It was on the night of Midwinter Eve, when Larissa should have been sitting in state with her family and presiding over the festivities in the hall, that instead she danced bare-shouldered in the snow around a great bonfire in Harknell Square. Strong liquor and the heat of the fire left beads of sweat on her neck, trickling down her breathless ribs, making icy trails along her spine. Her hair was loose, flinging as she whirled, plastering to her face when she stopped. Eurus, the cutpurse, reached a hand as they stood panting and pulled the sweat-sticky tendrils of hair from her cheek. She observed his face impassively, blurred with drink and the fog of their own breath. Pale, underfed, and lank-haired, he was not handsome in any usual sense, but attractive in a starved, perilous way. His eyes, half closed, focused on her lips. His mouth, Thin-lipped and prickled above and below by the sparsest of hairs, hung open slightly, showing a crooked row of lower teeth. His hand lingered on her cheek, and she turned her head to bite the nearest finger. A heartbeat later, those hands were in her hair, his mouth on hers, his knife-thin body pressed against her. She grasped his own hair hard and gave back the kiss, biting his lips, his ear, his neck, all her fury transmuted to hunger. A mailed fist gripped his shoulder, pulling them apart. She scrabbled at the bodice of her dress, covering exposed flesh, and stared wrathfully at the face of Sir Caliph. Time stretched and slowed like honey. Eurus's startled look flowed into dawning recognition of Caliph's palace livery. Caliph's hard glare turned to rage as he twisted Eurus to face him. She watched, mind transfixed, while her body moved on its own. In one of her thudding heartbeats, she lunged towards Caliph. In the next, the long dagger he wore at his hip was in her hand. Like all royal children, she had spent time learning the crafts of battle, though she had never shown much ability or appetite for them. A small skill, never properly learned and mostly forgotten, rippled back into her arm. With conscious volition hindered by ale and outrage, she thrust the tip of the poignard into Caliph's wrist. He roared. Loresa heard her own yell, distorted by sticky, slow time. Eurus stumbled away and vanished into the shadows without a backward glance, disappearing with the other revelers who had fled the moment the knight and his party strode into the square. Loresa slid sideways away from the wall, backing toward the alley, dagger tip held high, fixing the wounded gaze of Caliph with her own. Then she saw her, Nanain, one of the court mages, Guanan's own advisor, dark robes cutting a hole in the snowy street. The mage raised a hand, whispered a word, and the liquid ooze of time rushed back at Loresa, enveloping her. The amber that had slowed the seconds now froze her. Caliph and Nanain flickered past her stalled vision, their words faint and muffled. The knight, her bodyguard for as long as she could remember, rounded on the mage, snapping something harsh. He was gripping his wrist. Drops of claret fell sparkling on the trampled snow. Nanain said something that sounded like judgment and teeth. Her laughter was like the twittering of birds as she pointed at the trail of blood. Alenia's Song Overture by J.M. Landels. Verse 3, Irdane's Chorus. Tension flaps in the wind beneath camp banners bearing the star and horse of Gerondry, eldest son and heir of High Prince Goffrey of Brandishire. A knight and 3 men-at-arms form a phalanx around us, delivering us straight to the royal tent. Nord and I can hear moans and high-pitched screams as we approach. This is no normal labor. I hold back nausea as I enter. The smell of vomit, sweat, blood, and fear is overwhelming. I go to the laboring woman, hold her hand, mop her brow, and try to bring down her voice. Nord speaks with 2 drawn-looking knights. They have been chosen to be here because of their sex, but are of no more use than their male counterparts outside the tent. Prince Gerondry is away, explains one, speaking in a haggard whisper. Prince Chanus has been commanding here in his brother's guise. Few know of this. The absence was secret. Lady Tarish hoped to surprise her husband, to see him one more time before the birth. Here the lady screams, causing all the worried heads to turn. Nord hurries over, feels her belly, and peers under the blankets. I start to hum a calming song, hoping to override the panic that electrifies the woman's body. The night continues. Her voice buzzes like an insect around my head as I focus on the laboring woman's breathing. She was here, alone, resting after the journey. Then she was heard to cry out. Nord approaches the side table where a flagon and a cup stand. The cup is full. The wine smells untainted, though none have dared taste it, adds the knight. Nord sniffs the flagon. Fine seeming to you and me, she brings the cup to me. I inhale, just barely, beneath the grape and oak is a scent that should not be there. Poisoned, I confirm, and grip Tarish's hand to stop the rising scream. Nord pours the cup back into the flagon and stoppers it. Saved because of her condition, she explains shortly. She watered it by 3/4. Her tongue is more sensitive, so she took only 1 sip. If she, or the prince, Nord's voice, smooth and worn as river stones, pauses, allowing the attendant knights to absorb the implications. Had drunk a full draught, either would be dead. Instead, she says, as she opens her bag and begins laying out the tools of our trade, this babe will be born too soon. It is a long day and a longer night. Though the child is small, its position is poor, and the mother faint from vomiting. Nord's teas help calm her stomach and mind, and we nourish her body with thin broth, so by morning she is strong enough to rise and push out her baby. It is thin, ill, and weak, but alive. I sit outside the tent, wrapped in a cloak, sipping a cup of warm tea, breathing the fresh air I have craved all night. I've attended many births, but none before this has frightened me. I put a hand to my belly and try to slow my beating heart, to banish panicked thoughts. A thunder of hooves and dust rolls in. The stricken-faced rider of the first horse throws himself from the saddle and rushes through the tent flap without noticing me. The other rider swings down more slowly and takes the reins of both horses. His shoulders are round and weary from riding day and night to bring his brother here. A pair of squires catches up, and the younger prince hands the mounts over before turning toward the tent. The cold shock of realization jitters down my spine. He is as startled as I, though recognition takes a heartbeat longer. I wait nervously to see his reaction, glad, indifferent, or worse, while the implications of paternity wheel and stumble through my mind. Sights once dreamed and incomplete flick across my vision and blur the present with their sudden clarity. I should rise and curtsy, but my legs and stomach will not countenance it. He sweeps the ground with his cloak in a low bow. "Lady, I had not dared hope to see you again." His voice is thick with dust. I stagger to my feet. The cold morning air has stiffened my muscles. A wave of dizziness washes over me, and I sway, my hand outstretched for balance. He catches my elbow, steadying me, and the puzzle piece images, so close to coherent, flutter from my sight in the gentle morning breeze. I refocus my eyes on his, then drop them as I bob the slightest of curtsies. "Your Highness," is all my throat can manage. Despite myself, I find my ears and temples warming. There are sounds of both grief and joy from inside the tent. Nord steps out, allowing the prince and his family privacy. Her face is drawn and aged in the pink sunrise. The babe is suckling at last. Both are weak but will live. This is said with the confidence of more than speculation. I feel myself melting with unexpected relief. But Nord's voice is thin and distant. The child is blind.
And that was J.M. Landels, ladies and gentlemen. So definitely check out Atlanta's song and check out that whole saga. There's a buy link here at the bottom. You can definitely check it out there. And yeah, I think that will do it for this week of Just Joshing. I got one more announcement to make, guys, and this is a big one. June 25th, it will be the Wall of Wishes Challenge. Susie Vidori is launching her book, Wall of Wishes, and in doing so, I will be hosting a show in which I have to somehow be the adult in this situation and ask kids tough questions about the Westwoods, the Fountain, and Well of Wishes, because this will be Susie's last book in their series, and I feel Susie's gonna have a lot of fun with this. This is her first solo venture, and I feel one that she's gonna really excel at. So, Susie, I'm looking forward to working with you, and stay tuned for the Zoom link real soon. And that will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a number of different ways. Subscribe to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. I'm also looking for sponsorship as we speak as well. If you're an author looking to launch a book, you can definitely do so through the podcast. Give me a shout. We can work out rates and times, all that stuff. I've also sponsored other products as well. So if you want to help me there, that'd be great. My book, The Cloud Diary, is available right now through Amazon, exclusively at Amazon until August 31st. Is available digitally only as of right now. So you can pick it up for a song, or if you're a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can just read the book. That's awesome. Leave some reviews. I'd like to have some more of those. That'd be great. I have merchandise, jpanteloresco.redbubble.com. If you want to buy a t-shirt, mug, support the podcast that way, you can do so. Let's see. YouTube channels, Joshua Panteloresco. Twitter, Instagrams at jpanteloresco. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I have a Facebook page, Joshua Pantellerisco, author podcaster. And finally, there's my newsletter. Link at the bottom. Click sign up. There's also occasionally I give away goodies. And I also just generally talk about life going on in the world according to Josh. All right, guys. You take care of each other. Stay inspired.
Josh. Shush.